Good morning, everyone. We'll be continuing our study we've titled Unlocking the Book of Revelation. And we are in our final set of sevens. And this one is the final victory of Christ, the perfect seven, and his saints. And we are covering chapters 19 through 22 with that to the conclusion of the book. In Revelation 17 and 18, we were told of the fall of the beast, the false prophet, and Babylon or Rome. In Revelation 19, we saw the two suppers, a marriage feast for those faithful who don't have to worry about the second death, the feast of the fowls or vultures for the wicked that are aligned with Satan, and to these people, the Roman wicked. Well, in Revelation 20, Satan is finally dealt with as we start to get a conclusion of the entire cosmic scene. First bound during time here on earth by Christ and his mission, and bound by how much he could use nations as he did with Rome. But then the book looks at the final end of all things. Satan is ultimately cast into the lake of fire and brimstone. Death and Hades were cast into the lake of fire, enemies of mankind since Adam and Eve fell. Final judgment on the wicked is pronounced. They were sentenced to the second death in Revelation 20 and verse 14, and they were cast into the lake of fire. But what of those who do persevere, those who do overcome and remain faithful? What is their ultimate fate? These people that are suffering persecution need to know, basically, if I stay faithful to you, Lord, and I don't bow to the pressure the Roman emperor is putting on me to worship him, and it might even cost me my life, what will happen to me? And then the lesson, of course, for everyone that stays faithful to Christ and overcomes the trials of this world, what is the end of all this? And that's what we're going to see in Revelation 21 and 22. They are two of the most beloved chapters in the entire Bible. People may not spend a lot of time in Revelation 4 through 20, but their Bibles are often worn out at chapters 21 and 22. There were hints of our heavenly home in other parts of the Bible, but God waited for the last two chapters that were written in our Bibles to give these images of comfort. Now, I will mention this up front. One view we will not take is some believe, and I suppose it's possible in context, but I do not believe it, but I'm just going to point it out here. Some believe that in Revelation 21, we're going to see the new world that will be after Rome falls. So basically, on the earth, the church having peace because Rome has fallen. And to support that very briefly, there's been judgments on the earth, which were figurative ways to describe judgments against wicked nations. We certainly have seen that throughout the book. In context, then, some believe the last two chapters figuratively describe an ideal time for the church after Domitian's done and Rome is done. I do not take that position. I believe the book is simply giving a final conclusion once again to all of this for the wicked. And now what about the faithful? What is the story once again for the faithful? Well, let's go into it. They are beloved. Going to be some great stuff here for us. Let's read 21 and verse 1. Now I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. Also there was no more sea. So John says, I saw. So it's another vision he receives. He's received a bunch of them in the book. But what does he see? A new heaven and a new earth. Is it literally a new heaven and a new earth is the question. Some take this literally, that the earth will be rejuvenated and actually our heaven will be here on an earth returned to its paradise state. I do not. I do not take that position. And there are several biblical reasons for that. I'll briefly show it here. It's not in depth. But first off, the present earth, the Bible clearly says in non-symbolic passages, are going to pass away. So here's 2 Peter 3:12, the heavens will pass away with a great noise, the elements will melt with fervent heat, both the earth and the works that are in will be burned up. That word melt is, gone. And that's what Peter indicates. And there's no figurative language being used by Peter there. He's just describing what's going to happen at the end of things. Also, on the notion that the earth rejuvenated would be our heavenly home, well, Peter said in 1 Peter 1:4, to an inheritance incorruptible and undefiled that does not fade away, reserved where? In heaven for you. It's reserved there. When you think about Jesus, and he said, let your heart not be troubled. You believe in God, believe in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. Then what does he say? I think you know the phrase, I go to prepare a place for you. Well, if Jesus said 2,000 years ago, I'm going to prepare a place for you, and then in verse 3 says, if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, and where I am, there you may be also. Okay? And in Acts 1, Jesus ascended from the earth to where? Heaven. So when you're looking at Revelation, which is highly figurative, and there's a new heaven, a new earth, instead of literalizing that and saying, well, I think the earth will be turned like the Garden of Eden and we'll just live here. And you'll hear this a lot if you watch YouTube videos or hear a lot of things. But the whole book's figurative, and those clear teachings from our Lord and from Peter seem to make it pretty obvious to me this physical universe will be destroyed, but the Lord has prepared a place for the faithful. And that is where we shall reside. So that's not everything on it, but that's briefly how we're going to deal with it. No, and like I said, when you got highly figurative passages, careful of trying to make them contradict plain passages of Scripture. So what does the Bible mean when it says a new heaven and a new earth? Well, actually, we already know. Back in 20 and verse 11, it said, the earth and the heaven fled away, and there was found no place for them. Now, the first thing you need to notice, that heaven there is not where God lives. God's abode didn't fly away. That's obvious. So in the Bible, you have different heavens. You've got the heavens where the birds fly. You've got the solar system is the heavens. And yes, where God abides is heaven, but that didn't flee away from the presence of God. Clearly, this is the physical universe. So in 2011, in the vision, it says earth is gone, heaven fled away, right? Now in Revelation 21, John sees a new heaven and a new earth. So yet again, not talking about heaven, but where man dwells, okay? It's used 4 times in Scripture, this term, new heaven and new earth. In Isaiah, it's used to describe a new and better state of things. This is where some get the idea of the church in a better place after Rome fell, but I don't think that's what's being got at here. I think 2 Peter 3 will be much more instructive. I didn't get the right address down there. It's 2 Peter 3, 10 through 13. But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens will pass away with a great noise. The elements will melt with fervent heat. Both the earth and the works that are in it will be burned up. That heavens is the solar system, all your stars, the planets, where the birds fly. And it says melt. I mean, dissolved, gone, will be burned up. Therefore, since all these things will be dissolved, what manner of person ought you be in holy conduct and godliness, looking for and hastening the coming of the day of God, because of which the heavens will be dissolved, being on fire, the elements will melt with fervent heat. So it's pretty clear the physical universe is going to disappear, but now look what he says. Nevertheless, we, according to his promise, look for a new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness dwells. So the parallel here to Revelation, I think, is pretty clear. We have a judgment scene, which Revelation had. We have the heaven and earth passing away, which Revelation said. And we then have these new heavens and a new earth, so very similar. It's pulling from creation language. In the beginning, God created heavens and the earth. So if you think about the heaven and the earth, that's our universe we abide in, right? The heavens are where we receive our rain. We receive our sunlight that makes life possible. We breathe its air. So it's part of our abode. The earth, of course, is what we're physically on right now, and we have our dwellings, and we have our sustenance, and we have our water and our food, right? So the first heaven and first earth is our abode for this body, the physical abode. But the key word here, we get focused on earth and heaven, But the key word here is there's going to be a what heaven and earth in verse 1? What's it? New is the key word. Just as we're going to have spiritual bodies, new bodies when we're resurrected, instead of these physical ones. Just as our current bodies needed this environment. Even the atheist says it's amazing that, it's perfectly suited for life on this planet. Well, yeah, it is amazing because God created that way. But our spiritual bodies, our eternal bodies, will have a beautiful home too. That's the idea. In other words, a new heaven and a new earth is creation language in a figurative way to say heaven. Okay? A place for us at the end of all this. A figurative way to describe a final dwelling place eternally for God's people. And it lines up perfectly. If you look at 20:11 through 15, we've got final judgment. And then you have this epilogue to the book that shows what's going to happen to people. Whether you choose to serve the emperor in Rome and Satan, or whether you choose to serve Christ, what's going to happen? Well, the wicked got the lake of fire in the last chapter, this includes the beast, the false prophet, Satan. They got death, eternal death. What do the faithful receive? They get heaven with God, the angels, other saints, and eternal life. Okay? Now, very interesting phrase at the end of verse 1, also there was no more sea. Okay? Once again, if the idea is the earth rejuvenated, that'd be quite a different earth, wouldn't it? And some people try to literalize everything, but as we looked at, I don't think it is. But in Revelation 4:6, the throne room had a sea, the throne room of God, that was crystal mingled with fire. Some have suggested that sea represents the distance between God and sinful man. Okay? In chapter 15 and verse 2, the saints were standing on the sea, and here it's completely gone. The victory won, no separation anymore, we're united with God. Some think the sea here, because the book also has the sea the beast came out of, or the sea of wicked humanity, and the idea would be in heaven there will be none of these things. Okay, yet again, the victory won. So, actually, we're not sure which sea it is, but the meaning's very clear, right? When you get to heaven, anything negative and separating us from God or anything bad, it's all going to be victory for the church. You've made it here. There's no sea separating anything anymore. Let's go to verse 2. Then I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven, and God prepared her as a bride adorned for her husband. Got a vision here. Several Old Testament references. They'll be in the notes. I'll mention again at the end of this. I'll offer if anybody wants these notes, I'll share them with you. But we have a New Jerusalem. It was also in chapter 3 and verse 12. I will write on him the name of my God, the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which comes down out of heaven from my God. I will write on him my new name. Now, this is clearly, and we're going to see it in the verse itself, but here's another example from the New Testament. New Jerusalem is clearly the church. So you look at Hebrews 12 here. It says, you have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, to an innumerable company of angels, to the general assembly and what? Church of the firstborn who are registered in where? Heaven. To God, the judge of all, to the spirits of just men made perfect. You also see this in Hebrews 11:10, 13:14, Galatians 4:25 and 26. The clincher for who this is, or what this is the rest of the verse here. Prepared as a what? In verse 2. Bride. Does that language sound familiar? Right? Revelation 21:9, I will show you the bride, the Lamb's wife. Revelation 21:10 showed the great city, the holy Jerusalem, the Lamb's wife. In Ephesians 5, Paul says in verse 23 that we are the bride of Christ. That reference there. And Paul said elsewhere, he said, I betroth you to one, talking about Christ. The church is the bride of Christ, so it's a clincher. If you think about it, back in chapter 19, we were introduced to the marriage feast of the Lamb. So this joyous occasion of the church and the marriage feast, this celebration with her groom, the Lamb, Christ. Finally, the marriage takes place right here. We're with Christ forever, the church is. The idea making the marriage connection is the closeness we'll have with the Lord, the protection, the care that a husband gives his wife. Okay? So you kind of understand why God uses our most intimate of relationships to help us understand, right, the relationship with Christ and his church, and then what it'll be like in heaven. So New Jerusalem is the victorious church. These people that triumph over Rome, and all of us who triumph throughout all time, it's us. But it's not the church on earth here, it's the church in heaven. So that leads to the next part. It trips people up. They said, well, it's coming down from heaven. Why does it say that? How can the church come down from heaven and be in heaven? Well, of course, remember, we're dealing with highly figurative language. The main point here is not location, it's the source. Where does the church's eternal blessings come from? God. And back in 20, when we looked at, or was that 3? I can't remember that the church came. It says that came down heaven from God. So the idea here is the church is glorified. The church is given this glorious finish to be with God forever at this marriage feast, right? Let's look at verse 3. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, behold, the tabernacle of God is with men. He will dwell with them. They shall be his people. God himself will be with them and be their God. First thing I want you to notice, it's a loud voice he hears. Some 20 times John heard a loud voice in Revelation, and every time it seems to be something important. You know, you probably raise your voice when it's something you want to be heard. But the message is the tabernacle of God is with men. So when you think about Old Testament reference here, the tabernacle set in the center of the Israelite camp. In it was the Holy of Holies. What was inside there? What article of furniture? The Ark of the Covenant. And what physically presented itself on the Ark of the Covenant? They could see it. God's presence. But that got separated, didn't it? And that got done away with. And God is in the church today, but the notion here is we'll get complete closeness with our God when we get through all this and we make it to heaven. So that's the idea, the tabernacle there. Notice it says that they shall be his people. God himself will be with them and be their God. Now, I think one of the most beloved verses, I've used it in many a funeral, is Revelation 21:4. Another reason that I believe this is not talking about the church after surviving Rome. I believe this is definitely heaven, because this is the only thing it would really fit. God shall wipe away every tear from their eyes. There should be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There should be no more pain, for the former things have passed away. The promise of no more tears was promised back in Revelation 7. It is interesting that the first description of heaven is negative. What is not there? Think about that. What do you think that might be? Why do you think we get a negative description of what will not be in heaven instead of what will be in heaven? I like that. And what do you think we're able to understand better? Exactly. I mean, you could tell me about streets of gold, and we're going to talk about in a minute. Beautiful rivers of water, maybe, but they're figurative, you know. But there's some things we get. The things we don't like about here, the sorrow, the pain, the death, the tears. We'll be wonderfully glad to be rid of those. I've had many times been asked, I think it's one of the most common questions I have received, is, will I remember loved ones that were not Christians or were not faithful, that aren't there? How will I not have sorrow? We have the promise from the Lord that there will be no tears. I don't know if it's the glory of the Lord will make it so overwhelming that we won't feel it. I don't know if it'll be wiped from our memory so we don't remember it, and I don't need to know. My God has promised that there will be no tears in my eyes, no more death, no sorrow, no crying. Think about this. I read this in a commentary I thought was quite good. if there was an island on this earth where just one of these four was not there, take your pick. Either that island had no tears, it had no death, no sorrow, or no pain, how many people would sell everything they had to go live on that island? If it just had one of them, right? But tell people that there's a place where all four are absent. Isn't it amazing? But yet so many people won't reach out and accept God's grace and take it. You know, they'll trade it for this world, which does have these negative things. Let's go to verse 5. Then he who sat on the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. So this is unusual here that we have either the Father or Christ speaking. We're not sure which, but it doesn't matter. But there's a few times in Revelation God himself speaks, and this is one. And he said to me, Write, for these words are true and faithful. So God says, I make all things new. And that's really the message we got right here. God has already blessed us in this life with many new things. We have a new covenant that we're under, the covenant of Christ. Christ gave us a new commandment, John 13:34. We become new creatures or a new creation when we obey the gospel. We follow a new and living way, Hebrews 10:20. But someday God will make all things new, all things, and it'll be glorious. And then I want you to notice he tells John, Write, for these words are true and faithful. Sometimes I think John gets so distracted by the visions he has to be reminded. He's supposed to be writing the whole time. And it's almost like they're looking at John. He's just like staring at it. They're like, Write. And for these words are true and faithful. How can you and I know that this marvelous place is going to be for faithful Christians? Because God is true and God is faithful. So I could tell you the truth, but I might not carry it out. I could be faithful, but to a lie, but God is always true and always faithful. When I give you these amazing promises of an amazing place we read here, we can trust it. We can trust it if we overcome. Let's look at verse 6. And he said to me, It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give of the fountain of the water of life freely to him who thirsts. It is done, God says. Well, what is done? Well, in context, Rome's done, the beasts are done, Satan's done, the wicked are done, all enemies of God have been judged, the righteous vindicated, victorious, shown this wonderful place where they'll reside forever. So all these promises and curses listed in the book, when we get to the end of it all, it's done. And God can say it's done at this point because when God says it, it's sure. It's as if it already happened. And how can God deliver on these promises? I can make you these promises, but I can't deliver. Because he's the Alpha and Omega, first letter of the Greek alphabet, last letter, A to Z. He's the eternal one, the beginning and the end. Since God lives forever and has this power, he can give us these things. And he promises Christians here, I will give of the fountain of the water of life. Does anything represent life more to us than clear, cool water? Can't live long without it, can you? We're going to see in 22:1 that the water of life flows from the throne of God. And notice, it is without cost. Nothing man will or can ever do will earn what God is offering. It is a free gift. We call that grace. And it's by God's grace we will have this heavenly home. None of us say, look at all the things I do as a Christian, give me what I deserve. What we deserve is to be in the lake of fire with Satan and those people we've been looking at. But by God's grace, we receive these amazing blessings in the water of life. How about 21:7? He who overcomes shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, he shall be my son. So we've had this amazing look into the future in heaven, and he brings it back. He's writing to people that are there. John's on this island, Patmos. Rome is powerful. These people are being persecuted. It's about to get worse. And here's the reminder of what all this is about. This is to encourage them. He who overcomes. That's that Greek word Nike, victory, right? That's a taste of what awaits you, but you have to overcome. When the emperor says, call me Lord and God, you can't do it. When they're threatening your life, if you deny Christ, you can't do it. And what's the reward? He shall be my son. It's a constant theme in the Bible. Christians are already sons of God, Galatians 3, 26 and 27. But I'll tell you something, as I think about one daughter being away at school and blessed to have another daughter home for a week who's been away for a while, the blessings of family are truly greatest when we're together, right? They're always my children, you know, but we were talking when we had the 5 of us together this weekend. We took Hannah down. What a blessing it was to have our family together. I know you guys know exactly what I'm talking about, that have had kids move out and you have Christmas or Thanksgiving and everybody's together. So the notion we will be sons and daughters and we'll be with God together in heaven, and that's the idea is getting across here. There were several promises in Revelation to those who overcome. We've seen already, not hurt by the second death, given hidden manna, given a new name, power over the nations, clothed in white garments, name kept in the book of life. Christ said he would confess our names before the Father and before the angels, granted to sit with him on his throne. But what if, instead of overcoming, Nike, victory, one is overcome? What then? Well, let's look at verse 8. But the cowardly, unbelieving, abominable, murderers, sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, all liars shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. Those who overcome, blessed. 21:7. Those who overcome, not hurt by the second death. 2:11. Those who are overcome, receive the second death. Just look at the contrast here. In verse 6, the faithful get the water of life, no second death, with God forever. Unfaithful, lake of fire and brimstone, second death. Now this list is not comprehensive of everything that would certainly keep us out of heaven. But it is a list that will, and it's probably specific to John's readers. So think with me for a second, if you would, about what they're facing. It says the cowardly are going to get the second death. Well, if you're being threatened with your life, if you don't worship the emperor, do you think you might lose some courage and become a coward and just do it? Well, the cowardly won't be there. The unbelieving, how about those who abandon Christ from pressure and become non-believers? The abominable, you know, you go back to chapter 18 talking about the great harlot and her abominations, Rome, her cup of abominations, people that take part in her wicked deeds. Maybe that's what it's talking about, Christians that succumb and go worship in the pagan sacrifices and altars. Murderers, how about those who shed the blood of martyrs? The sexually immoral, sorcerers, and idolatry. All 3 of these were part of Roman worship. They had sexual acts included. They did their incantations. They certainly were idolaters, so maybe very specific. Liars. There were those who denied Christ even if they did not mean it, maybe to save their, just like Peter did, right? No, I don't believe in Christ, Caesar's Lord, with a finger crossed, but you can't do that. That is still being a liar and denying Christ, and those people, unrepented of, will receive the second death in the lake of fire and brimstone. Now we go to verse 9, and we're about to get a picture back to the glory of what we get if we're faithful. Verse 9, then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls filled with the 7 last plagues came to me and talked with me. I thought this was very interesting. This angel appeared earlier. We've had a lot of different angels. And last time this angel appeared had a bowl of wrath with judgment on Rome. But now, for God's people, he's not bringing judgment. He's got something great to show John. And it says, he came to me and talked with me, saying, come, I will show you the bride, the Lamb's wife. So yet again, we had this marriage feast of the Lamb in chapter 19. Here, the wedding picture between Christ and the church, faithful Christians, the victorious church that makes it through. This gives a lot of hope. Now, I'm going to show a picture here. And here's something I realized. Every picture I've shown, I'm sure, is not what John saw. Maybe it's helped us. I've heard a lot of positive feedback about the pictures I've generated, just to give us some idea, maybe, what he saw, to bring it to mind. But as I got to an image of heaven, it's probably better left with no picture, to let our imaginations try to see it. But I think it'll be vague enough that still it'll leave enough to the imagination. So he's going to give us a description here the best he can. And this book is figurative. So safe to say, when he's giving these materials like gold and gemstones, that's not what they are. It's a spiritual existence. It's just all John could understand, right? What John is being shown. So the first thing he says in verse 10, he carried me away in the spirit to a great and high mountain. John actually has 3 locations in the book. On the Isle of Patmos, these visions start appearing to him. He's taken to the wilderness in 17, probably in spirit, probably still sitting on Patmos, but in mind. And now probably the same to a high mountain. And he's looking at this city that came down out of heaven. And we already saw it was the church, the bride of Christ, very clear. So bride, Lamb's wife, holy city, New Jerusalem, all the church. We already looked at, not ready for that. We already looked at that in Hebrews 12. So he's given a vision here of the church in glory, the church in heaven. What will the heavenly abode be for the faithful? Let's look at verse 11. Having the glory of God, her light was like a most precious stone, like a jasper stone, clear as crystal. Interestingly, in chapter 4, in the throne room, God was compared to a jasper stone, which was comparable to a diamond. I don't know if it actually is a diamond. There's some conjecture on what these stones are, but it's clear as crystal, so you get the idea here. And the glory of God was once in the tabernacle, in the temple, but now in the victorious church. And we see that the light of God's glory, down in verse 23, lights the city, so you don't even need a sun or a moon. Look at 12 and 13. Also, she had a great and high wall with 12 gates, 12 angels at the gates, names written on them, which are the names of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. 3 gates on the east, 3 gates on the north, 3 gates on the south, 3 gates on the west. A lot of things taken from Ezekiel here, but we see these gates here, and we see these angels and these 12 tribes. Interestingly, over in chapter 7, the 12 tribes were mentioned, but it was a different list. It substituted Manasseh for Dan, probably because Dan turned to idolatry. So more figurativeness. But in Ezekiel, it describes this great temple, and it says, it calls it the Lord is there. So you get the idea again of God's presence being there. Angels guarding it. Will we need protection in heaven? You think we're going to need protected from anything in heaven? No. But showing us that angels are guarding it for people that are suffering lets us know that heaven is safe. It's going to be a safe place for me. I don't have to worry about enemies anymore. I don't have to worry about someone coming to my home and dragging me out and killing me, which some of these people might face. I'm going to be in a city that's beautiful, and there's angels at the gates. Nobody's going to touch me here. Okay? They need that comfort. Look at verse 14. Now the wall of the city had 12 foundations. On them were the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. 12's been our religious number. 12 tribes, 12 apostles. The walls were the 12 tribes, and now these foundations are the 12 apostles. Were there exactly 12 apostles? How many were there? Well, 14, really. Matthias took Judas' spot, and then there's one more, Paul. But they're always called the 12. So regardless of how it is, even when there was 11, they called them 12. So, but it's a reminder to us the church was built on the foundation of the apostles and the prophets. We see that word for word in Ephesians 2:20, building up a holy temple for the Lord, a dwelling place of God. So you can see the imagery being pulled in here. Look at verse 15. And he who talked with me had a gold reed to measure the city, its gates, and its walls. So back in Ezekiel, that city was measured, and he's told to measure it. There was for protection. The idea that I'm going to protect Israel when they come back from captivity. But heaven will certainly be safe, but it could also just be to show the grandeur of heaven, because it's going to be amazing when you hear these measurements. So look at 16. The city is laid out as a square. Its length is as great as its breadth. He measured the city with the reed. 12,000 furlongs its length, breadth, and height are equal. So 12,000 furlongs cubed. Now, some translations will convert it. It's about 1,500 miles cubed. To give you an idea of the size of this city, which once again will show you why saying this is literal Jerusalem is missing the figurative nature. 1,500 miles is from New York to Houston, Texas. That square, it's a square that is 8.4 times bigger than Texas. That city would be bigger than Europe or Australia. Now, some people just say, well, God's going to remake the earth, and he's going to make this giant city here on the earth, or it's figurative language. Think about this. It's a cube, so it's 1,500 miles tall. Did you know a spacecraft encounters re-entry, where it gets the flames around it, where the atmosphere is heavy, at just 75 miles above the earth? A meteor turns into a shooting star at just 53 miles above our heads. This city is 1,500 miles tall. Is that literal, or is it figurative to show the grandness of the glory of heaven for the church? The 12,000 is clearly our numbers. We got 12, the covenant number of God, plus 1,000, which stands for perfect completeness, 10 times 10 times 10. So you get the idea. You've got a perfect cube that is massive and huge and perfect. It's perfect. It's heaven. Interestingly, the Holy of Holies was a cube. It was a cube. But when you think of how large heaven is, what comfort does that give Christians? What does it let us know? There's room for everybody in there. There's not going to be no room at the end in heaven. Everyone that's faithful will have their mansion, right? You can't be limited in number. That's right. Some try to do. Look at verse 17. Then he measured its wall 144 cubits according to the measure of a man, that is, of an angel. Measure of a man's interesting. It's probably there to let us know these are not figurative numbers, as far as not some angel number, because you look at a 1,500-mile city, you're like, what? And it is figurative. But the idea is just like you understand a cubit, this is how big we're trying to describe to you here. But its wall is only about 220 feet. Some think it's the thickness of the wall, but all the translators seem to think it's the height of the wall. It seems strange. Your city's 1,500 miles high, but the wall 220 feet. Here's the important part. 144 furlongs is what times what? Makes 144. 12 times 12. God's covenant times God's covenant. You see how it's doubled there, and you get the idea. Now let's look at Revelation 21. In verse 18. The construction of its wall was of jasper. The city was pure gold like clear glass. I think we're familiar with the streets of gold in heaven, but did you realize the whole city is pure gold in the vision? I forgot it. Streets of gold, we always say, but the whole city is described as gold. So pure that it's clear like glass. Does it glitter like glass? What does that even mean? Not sure, but it's figurative anyway. Is it real gold in this city? No. It's not real gold. Let's look at verse 19. The foundations of the wall of the city were adorned with all kinds of precious stones. The first foundation was jasper, the second sapphire, the third chalcedony, the fourth emerald, the fifth sardonyx, the sixth sardius, the seventh chrysolite, the eighth beryl, the ninth topaz, the 10th chrysoprase, the 11th jacinth, and the 12th amethyst. Beautiful stones. Very similar to what was in the high priest's breastplate. I thought that was interesting. Also read, this is where we get our birthstones from. I did not know this. They said it was this list that people turned into our birthstone list. So we probably all know what our birthstone is. I thought that was interesting. They had to be impressive to John. Like I said, the gemstones are a little unclear on exactly what they are. Here's our best guess. The green of jasper, blue of sapphire, milky brown of chalcedony, green of the emerald, white of sardonyx, red of the ruby or sardius, yellowish green of chrysolite, the violet of beryl, yellow of topaz, golden green of chrysoprase, which is turquoise, the blue of jacinth, and the violet of amethyst. And we like precious stones, and are there real precious stones there? No. But it helps us understand the beauty of the place, does it not? Then, one of the more famous passages, verse 21, the 12 gates were 12 pearls. Each individual gate was of one pearl, and the street of the city was pure gold like transparent glass. Pearls are classified as a gemstone, although they come out of an oyster. In the 1st century BC, Julius Caesar passed a law that only the ruling class could wear pearls. So only the highest status people. Cleopatra was said to crush a pearl into a glass of wine to prove to Mark Antony of Rome that she could give the most expensive dinner in history. And I looked up the value of pearls, and they are insanely valuable. Might not surprise you, might. I didn't write down the numbers, but very valuable. But I want you to notice, they're not pearly gates, as in covered in pearls, as we think about it. They're each made from one giant pearl. And I did depict it here. You can kind of see they got a pearl there. One person commented, imagine the size of the oyster it would take to produce the gates for this 1,500-mile tall city made out of pearls. But, I mean, it's figurative, right? Streets of gold, that's probably the part that, one of the parts most famous to us. It is interesting that in Smyrna, one of the 7 cities, it had a street of gold. It had marble streets with gold inlaid. They said it looked like a necklace going through the hillside. It went past all their temples, and it was called the Street of Gold. So it might be to those people that are receiving this letter, this idea that, Rome thinks they're glorious. Where you're going, if you're faithful, is truly glorious. Look at verse 22. But I saw no temple in it, for the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are the temple. It has no temple, because God dwells in the city, the church in heaven. There's no need for a place for the Lord to dwell in a temple or tabernacle, because the entire city is a temple. Just no temple described here. God is there. 23, the city has no need of the sun or of the moon to shine in it, for the glory of God illuminated, the Lamb is its light. And we don't like dark, and we love the light, and there the Lamb lights it. Another famous passage from Revelation. Let's look at 24 through 26. And the nations of those who are saved shall walk in its light. And the kings of the earth bring their glory and honor into it. Its gates shall not be shut at all by day. There shall be no night there. And they shall bring the glory and the honor of the nations into it. When you see that the nations, the saved of the nations are coming in, and the glory of the kings, those that are saved, those that do what the Lord says, their glory, whatever they had on earth, these nations, these kings, pales in comparison to what awaits there. So they're bringing their glory. They're not making it better by being there. The idea is they're basically throwing their glory. My glory was nothing as a king on this earth compared to your glory, God, and what you are giving the faithful here, is the idea. Christ, of course, is King of kings, Lord of lords. And we're going to see that nothing corrupt is there, of course. Its gates shall not be shut at all by day. What was significant about gates left open in ancient times? Enemy would come in. They're so safe they can just leave the gates open. And then we're going to close, because that was the second bell, wasn't it, Scott? I wanted to get a little farther. We're going to close with verse 27 to finish chapter 1. There shall by no means enter anything that defiles or cause an abomination or a lie, but only those who are written in the Lamb's book of life. Here's the important part. We got to get to this beautiful place, and we've got to overcome as the church. We've got to be faithful. Think about this. The church on earth has wheat and tares, doesn't it? There's people sitting in buildings like this all over the world that look like Christians. So the church has tares, but there in heaven it will not. Nothing that defiles will enter it. Guys, thanks for your attention today on this beautiful picture of heaven. We'll have more of that next week.